Afternoon all. This is a Nakamura game against Levon Aronian. So Aronian actually won the tournament, but to me Naka's the real hero. He's the ICC king. His play is very creative, dynamic, exciting, and I just really admire his play. And also I had an opportunity to play him in real life in a Blitz game once at the Gibraltar Congress in the hotel bar between rounds. The atmosphere there at the Gibraltar Congress is great, and he thrashed me, but it was great thrill to play him. Okay, so d4, and Levon played d5. Solid stuff. Trompovsky, already a surprise from Naka. So what will Levon play? In fact, Levon's play reminds me when I played black against Trompovsky the first time I played in the British Championship. I played this very solid setup with black, just sort of Slav formation with the bishop outside the pawn chain. Okay, knight c3, knight d7, and my opponent actually did play in a similar way with queen b3. A solid response here now is queen b6. So can White get anything from this position? Does White have a slight pull on the queen side, slight grip on the queen side, maybe with c5 later? The problem with c5 is usually strategically, this is a fixed target committing to c5. Black can sometimes break out with e5 with some preparation and expose d4 as a weakness. That's the thematics of it. Of course, in this position, White's got a very good grip at the moment on e5, and that liberating break would seem impossible. But actually Levon played this e5 as a pawn sacrifice later in the game, as we're going to see. So h3 gives the bishop a nice little cozy square on h2 if needed, but knight e4 was played now, which by getting rid of that knight weakens White's control of e4, I guess. Now this committal move c5 is played by Naka. So inviting the queen's exchange, he gets some dynamism on the a file. But is that going to be worth anything? That's the question. a6, now b4. Okay, the pawn is threatening b5 because there's a pin on the a6 pawn. Rook c8, taking away from that pin, so b5 can now be taken safely. Now Naka takes on e4, bishop e4, and plays knight d2. Okay, what does White have? A slight edge in space, slight grip on the dark squares. Especially d6, b6, maybe the possibilities later of a knight tour, if that's going to be effectual, I don't know. Okay, bishop e7, now knight b3 in fact was played, and now knight a5. So this is actually what happened. So White doesn't mind black taking on a5. He locks and undoes his double pawns. He locks b6 as a square, so maybe these rook maneuvers to either a3 or a4 later can be combined. b7 could be a potential target as the exploitable part of the pawn chain, because these other parts look pretty solid, apart from a6 I guess, which is also exposed. But a6 and b7, can those be future targets for White in this position? Now, do you remember earlier I said one of the problems with c5 was this e5? In fact, it's played as a pawn set now. Otherwise, if it's not, maybe even bishop d6 here for White, and f4 even. I suppose black can continue with f6 and e5 against that sort of plan. But anyway, e5 was played, which does represent a pawn sack, because not d takes, then there's knight takes, but actually bishop takes. But it leaves White's pawns seemingly totally shattered and not particularly useful here. And as if black can, just exert loads of pressure. And if White ever plays f4, then there's going to be trouble. It would seem intuitively. But castles king d2, White is not without resources here to defend this position. He is a pawn up. Rook ce8, now f3, first kicking the bishop. Now f4. So black has to carry on with this plan, otherwise he's doing nothing here, and White can just gradually improve the position. So f6, energetic play from Levon. Now we have ef, rook f6. So what are the problems here for White? Well, the immediate problem is this doubling, putting pressure on e3, and then maybe even d4 as a pawn sack, getting access to the second rank, especially if this bishop wasn't covering e2. That could be potentially fatal. Rook a3 though, naturally a defensive move, only move to defend the pawn. Rook fe6. So now a nice interesting little move, g3, which also means now the rook can, if needed, maybe develop like this if needed, but it's supporting f4 as well in case that becomes vulnerable. So he's strengthening his position a bit. The position looks kind of not you know, how is white going to be broken up here? That's the question. King f8 was played. Okay, which actually is a bit of a tactical liability actually for this potential f5 threat. If the rook ever got to the f file, f5 becomes a tactical possibility for white to use. And in fact, even in this position, after rook h2, you know, f5 and rook f2 is a threat now. After d4, I'm wondering actually, looking at this now, well, f5 and rook f2 is not going to work because of d takes e3 check, winning the rook on f2. So this f5 is not playable here. So Naka really has to do something now. He played e takes d4, but he's got this threat in reserve, this f5. Now rook e4, okay, what to do about d4 now? So white's under fire, it seems, at this part of the game. Okay, so rook d8, f5 to continue the story. So remember, we've had that tactic, but before it's been used now. Bishop f7 though, there's a nice blockading square. Bishop's potentially strong on that blockading square. And if the black rooks maybe return to the e file, this could be dangerous. But you know, black is not without liabilities. These two pawns are just waiting to be exploited somehow. And if these pawns, you know, they're dangerously poised, they're restrained at the moment. You know, this a pawn is a potential if these pawns can be eliminated. So that's dreaming about the position though. There's concrete issues to solve here. First of all, d4. So protecting d4 first. Now there's a tactical move which attacks two pawns. Actually, it's using that pin, so it's attacking c5 and f5. So what does white want to do here? Well, he doesn't particularly want to lose either. He plays actually king c3, so he shows a slight bias towards not minding losing the f pawn rather than the c pawn. So rook takes f5 was not played here. In fact, a check was played here. Now let me see. Rook takes f5 without engine analysis. Rook f5. I would say, you know, maybe just bishop d3. So anyway, Levon's choice was rook e3 check, because he's got an idea. He doesn't want the f5 pawn. Apparently he wanted the g pawn instead. So bishop d3 just took on g3. But now white's got some breathing space, and what do we do with breathing space? We can sometimes crush the opponent with a little bit of breathing space. It's good to remember that, because chess has so many resources at one's disposal. So rook b4, brilliant resource, just logical, hit that pawn chain. Rook d7. Now king d2. Okay, what is the point of king d2? Well, I think it frees up the bishop, because the bishop was actually pinned, and that's one implication. If the bishop's freed up, then also maybe the rook can now swing across more easily. Yes, now cheating by knowing the next move, this bishop unpinning is actually critical if this bishop is ever going to be used on these squares. In particular, f5 as a tactical idea to try and get to this pawn, believe it or not. I know what I've said doesn't make sense, but have a look at this continuation. And this I saw, you know, the night before that horrendous loss I had the other night. And it's funny that there's a passed pawn race in effect here between this pawn and this pawn. And white wins this pawn race very resourcefully. So h5 is the beginning of the race. This pawn's blockaded at the moment. You have to get rid of the blockaders. So f6 plays a key role in that, believe it or not, because it means bishop f5 and bishop c8 potentially. Now when I checked this the other day with Ribka, the part of the game continuation, which someone's thankfully extended with the video coverage again, it was not finished. It had bishop f5, and I thought with Ribka there's rook c E7 was cried out by Rivka, not the game continuation, which actually just seems to lose. So black, by not factoring in this slight nuance of trying to slow down white's removal of these blockaders, loses this passed pawn race. Okay. But if this pawn was also in the way, this pawn's not going anywhere anyway. But white has to use this bishop to try and win these two guys, giving the effect of a pawn race between this guy and this guy. So rook e7, now bishop c8, and this is what I mean, h4, and now here the bishop has to be taken off the diagonal, it has to be taken off the protection of h3 if white wants to get his a pawn in this race. So rook takes b7, takes, and now we have the race. But it seems Naka's got things under control. Bishop d5, okay, the docking square is now ready, the docking landing gear for h1. Okay, but bishop takes a6. The pawn is unblockaded, it's now free, technically, legally, to go to the queening square. This blockade is taken out of the way, this one's now legally free to come to the queening square. So who wins this race? It's a very, very short race actually. From here, only about 5.5 moves, believe it or not. I wonder if you can just visualize it. We're going to have to get good, you and me, the audience of my YouTube channel, at pawn races. They win games in endgames. Can we master these kind of races? Now here, this is a race situation. So how is white's pawn more significant than black's pawn? Can we immediately see why? Not totally clear here. You can imagine, maybe one possibility for black is to actually interfere with white's pawn with rook h1 to a1 at some point. Make a note of that possibility. Does this rook have to get behind any pawns? No. It's playing an interfering role for h2. Doesn't really have to or have time to get behind the pawn. Can't even do that anyway because of that bishop here. So forget this rook, it's going to play a minor role at the moment, except for slowing down black's pawn a little bit. So bishop d3, get out of the way of the pawn. Pawn's ready to run. Now, rook h1. And you would think here, well, the bishop's just come to d3. Would it really be useful to waste another move? Well, it's essential to waste another move here. So whether that move was a blunder or not, it probably wasn't, I assume. But here, white cannot just go a6 because of rook a1. So this pawn will be coming down and winning the race. If, h3, bishop g2, maybe then h2. If we have h3 and bishop g2, then h2 is free. So this is very, very dangerous. Okay. Although in this position, it would also seem that rook h2 is possible, to be fair. So maybe I don't know, h3 a7 rook a1. No, h3 and then there's a block, so I think this would have had to be played. But rook h2 would seem a good move here. Okay, and this pawn's still protected. So it seems white's better here. Please let me know if I'm wrong. That white's just seems to be clearly better here in terms of the a pawn versus the h pawn. That didn't happen. So in this position, after rook h1, Naka sealed off the rook from the a1 square. He played bishop f1. Okay, now h3, and after a6, white clearly has won the pawn race, and Levon's had enough. He can't do anything with his pawn, and he can't do anything to stop this pawn from queening because of his own pawn here stopping the queening square. So what a race to win, very efficiently. The race conditions set up from the opening with white's space on the queen side, justifying that c5, which normally a counter strategy in the centre would be effective. That's the normal effective antidote when white commits to c5. But later by that threatened knight manoeuvre, we saw that white had more advanced pawn on a5, and then he's liberated it very successfully in this game. Very instructive. Please leave any comments or questions on YouTube. Thanks very much.